fall brings the excitement of new homeschool stuff. We're talking about the highlight of the homeschool year in our house. All those nice, new, shiny books just beckoning to a homeschool mom, whispering in her ear, yes, I am the answer to all of your homeschool needs. Unfortunately, some of those items lived up to their promises and some didn't. So today, I'm going to walk you through my personal top 5 resources that did not work out. That's right, these babies right over here. I'm going to tell you why I chose each one in the first place, and then what went wrong, and just to keep it real, I'm also going to share what I used as replacements and why those did work. Now, keep in mind that my kids are not your kids, and vice versa. And just because something didn't work for us doesn't mean it won't work for you. Just saying, that's my disclaimer. But this is why I'm taking the time to really give you the lowdown on each of these resources so you can decide for yourself. So let's start with my number 1 mistake, the resource I love to dislike the most.
No.
So this little gem, is anything but little, right? Okay, this is Easy Grammar Plus. As you can see here, there's Easy Grammar Plus. And I actually had a printer cut off the binding so I could put it in a spiral notebook and maybe it would be a little easier to work with on a daily basis, okay? So why did I choose that? I was looking for an all-inclusive grammar program when I bought this. I wanted to cover all the bases without having to go the usual circular, route of constant review like we usually do with grammar. You teach it every year from elementary through junior high. No, once and done. That's what I wanted. What I actually got was 700 pages of death by grammar. Now, don't get me wrong, this humongous thing is very complete, which is a plus. It includes student worksheets, all the answer keys, a student guide, and of course, teaching notes. But for us, it was just overwhelming. Way too many topics, a boatload of repetition, just way too much grammar. Instead, we switched to this handy little book, which is also by Easy Grammar. This is 180 daily teaching lessons, right? And grade 9, right? And it's exactly what it says it is. It's 180 pages. Your student does a page a day. Each page covers a variety of grammar topics. Like, let me just give you an example here. Day 113, we have capitalization, punctuation, parts of speech adjectives, parts of speech conjunctions, and sentence combining. Okay, another page, day 47, we have capitalization, punctuation, phrases and clauses, parts of speech, which would be verbs, and sentence combining. And it's just like, a few exercises. It's really no big deal. So the way to use it is you, the parent, decide how much teaching you want to do based on how much your child already knows. A little aside here, I actually taught my kids the mechanics of English grammar with Latin, but I also wanted them to have a standard overview. Get the terminology in case they ever needed to define a dangling participle. Yeah. So, daily teaching lessons gives you that thorough overview of grammar without being overkill. Another little secret here. Knowing a lot about grammar does not make you a better writer. Just saying. Learning grammar is all about making logical connections in the brain. So, let's move on to my second resource mistake.
No.
I love history, as in history fascinates me, and it always has, yes. So when I wanted to teach my kids history, I was really excited. Now, when we started homeschooling, I had a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a baby, and pretty much no idea whatsoever what I was doing. I just knew that we'd survived public school kindergarten and that there had to be a better way. Now, I had a friend who had also just started homeschooling, and she was using Sunlight. So that's what I used the first couple of years until I got my feet wet, you know. Sunlight history is literature-based, which I liked, but I didn't like not being able to deviate from their lesson plans. Oh yeah, I could substitute a book in or be able to pull one off, but the problem is that when I did that, they'd have other stuff on the schedule that tied into that one that I changed, and really mess things up. So when I branched out on my own, I decided that I wanted a history textbook to keep us on track. Now, this baby right here, this is my history textbook from my college days, back when I minored in medieval history. I love this book. I still pull it off my shelf anytime I want to brush up on that particular moment in history. Oh yeah. So I figured a history textbook would be great with my kids. Yeah, right. A great big snooze fest. Enter this gem, Mystery of History. Now, I should have known to run away when I saw comprehensive quizzes and review pages, but my common sense was sleeping that day. Yeah, this totally did not work out for us because it dumbs down history into lessons. Here's an example. Let's take the Emperor Charlemagne. Mystery of History boils down one of the most important figures in medieval history down into 3 pages, roughly, okay? Skips right over most of his life for the sake of, I don't know how many pages are in the book. Not to mention, the text is at about a 5th grade level, so that's not exactly inspiring. Let me just give you a taste here. His son Charlemagne, the main subject of our lesson, inherited the Frankish Empire the same year his father died. He was blonde, 6'4", handsomely built, and very ambitious. And for reasons other than his regal looks, some would say that Charlemagne was one of the greatest kings of the entire Middle Ages. He certainly was responsible for many good things. Yeah, okay. Not really inspiring for me, no. So, what we switched to was this. Truthquest History. Yes, this is not a textbook, but it serves roughly the same purpose by keeping you on the linear historical track, okay? However, instead of lessons, it uses great literature to do that. So for any given topic, they give you a bunch of titles to go with that you can go and read. So back to our friend Charlemagne. Instead of 3 pages, if we turn to Charlemagne in here, we get, this is just the start of it, we get about 25 books to choose from. Seriously, pick 1, pick 2, hey, pick them all. Your kids will actually learn history. By the way, I made 2 whole videos on the topic of teaching history, and I'll put a link to the first one somewhere up here, which talks about how to teach history, and then the second one is product reviews, including Truthquest, so be sure and watch that one as well. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to mistake number 3.
No.
In case you didn't know it, I am a huge fan of state homeschool conventions. In fact, I did a video about that too, just saying. There's no better place to build your homeschool data bank of information, which is perfect for a lifelong learner like me. Yep, I pack out my schedule with as many workshops as I can, and I take all the notes and I keep all the handouts, and I really try to put all those new ideas into practice. But every once in a while, I run into something that sounds great on paper, but not so much in actual application. And that is how I ended up with mistake number 3, which is Videotext Interactive Algebra. So for like 3 years straight, I went to workshops led by Tom Clark. He's the author of Videotext Interactive Algebra. And I was dazzled, just dazzled. Tom Clark not only gets math, he gets how to teach it to those of us that don't get it. Yeah, so based on my complete admiration for this guy, I was sure that I had hit the algebra jackpot. Now, a little sidebar here. I actually like algebra. It makes sense to me, which means that to this day, hey, I can still sit down with a page of algebra problems and solve them. Yeah, but this is exactly where Videotext and I get into trouble. Yeah, in math, there's this standard scope and sequence, like the progression of topics that everybody uses, right? You start here in pre-algebra and you end over here in algebra 2. But in Tom Clark's universe, you start somewhere kind of over here, and then you go over here, and then you go over here. In other words, Videotext Interactive doesn't follow the path. It teaches topics all over the map, right?
Ew!
So this was a deal breaker for me. Mind you, my oldest child, the algebra guinea pig in this case, might have done okay if we'd stuck with it, but I was totally lost most of the time when I was trying to help him. And really, my son was not connecting the dots well because let's just say there's a reason why algebra is normally taught following a certain path. Yep. So let me give you some examples. I even made up a little spreadsheet for this. So this is just my little spreadsheet that I put together to kind of compare these. I'm comparing against Matthew C because Matthew C is super regular, linear. Is pretty much the standard way of presenting algebra. By the way, a little note down here. Videotext Interactive, 6 modules, 176 lessons altogether. That would be going from pre-algebra all the way through algebra 2. Matthew C, same thing, but in 3 books, 101 lessons. Just a little note, this 101 lessons, there are actually 6 work pages in each one of those that you can choose how many you want to do, but just saying there's just a slight difference there. So let's look at this. We got, starting with our first topic, negative numbers. Videotext does not throw that in right away. It spends time on a few other initial topics. Matthew C, the first lesson in pre-algebra 1 is negative numbers. Absolute value, Videotext is pulling up a number 40. Matthew C uses it way earlier in lesson 19. Polynomials, which is a basic thing in algebra, they're not pulling it up until lesson 89, whereas Matthew C, you're in lesson 23, you're still in pre-algebra, and they're pulling up polynomials. Graphing. Graphing, interestingly, is presented before polynomials, which I would never have thought of that. In Matthew C, you can see it comes after, it's in algebra 1. Radicals, another one of those things that goes into algebra 2, but not super far. But yet Videotext Interactive is putting this way back, whereas Matthew C is just like, I don't know, a little over 5 lessons into algebra 2, I think. And then quadratic formula. This is way back for Videotext Interactive, and it's like, you know, partway through algebra 2, but certainly not that far back. So I'm just saying, you know, if you don't really remember algebra, or you don't really have an attachment to how it normally goes as a flow, this might not bother you. But for me, yeah, drove me nuts. So after a very expensive decision to ditch Videotext Interactive, yeah, because I'm one of those all in or not at all people, so of course I bought the entire program, we went back to my old favorite, Matthew C. Yes, Matthew C. Algebra, it had always worked for us. We started in pre-algebra, worked all the way through algebra 2 with all of my children. And algebra returned to its normal course, and all was well in the world, right? So the lesson here for me was this. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. No matter how much you like the author or the pretty packaging, stick with what you know works, right? So now let's look at mistake number 4.
No.
As many of you know from a video I did a couple of weeks ago, I have a very right-brained child. But I also have an extremely left-brained child. And tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. Anyway, Mr. Right Brain has lovely handwriting, including cursive, while Mr. Left Brain has this terrible, cramped, bent over print handwriting, and his cursive is even worse. So in my effort to improve Mr. Left Brain's skills, I went in search of something new in the way of handwriting curriculum. And in my shopping, I came across this, the Italic handwriting series by Getty and Dubay. Okay, now I was immediately impressed with this one because it's published by my old college alma mater, Portland State University. Not that I'm a big PSU booster, but hey, I know these guys right. It must be good. So we started out with print practice, and that went pretty well because Italic is a pretty neat way to write. But then we got to the transition to cursive, and everything just sort of slid south at that point. The problem is this. Italic cursive is basically print with little joining strokes. As you can see here, there's almost no difference. This doesn't sound that bad until you realize your kid has no idea how to read regular cursive. Yep, and that's a big problem. It ranks right up there with never learning to tell time on an analog clock. It's an assumed life skill. So we switched to this very no-frills program, which is Handwriting Skills Simplified. It's called Simplified because it uses the simplified Zehner-Bloser alphabet. Looks pretty much like any regular cursive style. You can see it on the cover here, but it's a little bit easier to learn. And it worked as well as any program was ever going to work for Mr. Left Brain. He still has terrible handwriting, but at least he can actually read and write cursive, so I consider this one a win. And speaking of wins, this brings me to mistake number 5, which I wanted to work more than any resource I've ever used.
Oh no!
I would classify my homeschool style as eclectic, but I definitely lean to the classical side. I love the idea of teaching methods and subjects that come out of the past that have successfully trained the great minds of men, right? So when it came to teaching English usage and writing, I dove headfirst into that old standard sentence diagramming. Now, mind you, I had no idea how to do this because it wasn't taught when I was in school, which meant I needed a lot of help. And I found this, The Complete Book of Diagrams by Mary Daly, right? What drew me to this book was the very complete looking teacher's manual in the back. That would be these pretty blue pages, okay? And this is what I learned. Diagramming is like going to war with language.
Charge!
Seriously, you have to cut all the sentences apart and then piece them back together again. To which I have to ask, why? You know, the further I got into this book with my kids, the more ridiculous it seemed. I mean, just, I couldn't figure out for the life of me how any of this would make grammar or a proper usage stick. Let's take a look at a typical page here, just to show you what I mean. All right, here we go, right? Take a look at this. There's stuff everywhere, right? I mean, this is the stuff that nightmares are made of in my book. So, after several weeks of me trying to explain what didn't make sense to me either, we gave up on diagramming and moved on to another classical standard, Latin. Yes. And guess what? Latin was great. For one thing, written Latin is actually the basis for English. So it uses most of the same parts of speech, but in an unfamiliar way because the sentence structure is not the same. So in other words, Latin teaches you how to use the parts of speech, not just where to put them. And after trying a couple of different Latin curriculums, the one we settled on was Latina Christiana. Yeah, this is a fabulous resource. And in fact, I'll be filming a video in the very near future that's all about teaching Latin, and it'll be based on this curriculum. So I'm just saying, don't dismiss Latin doing that with your kids. I know it sounds complicated, but it really is a great subject with a ton of benefits. And I'll tell you what, all I can say about diagramming is this. It might have worked for George Washington, but Latin, way better choice in our homeschool. So that's my top 5 things that didn't work. And to be honest, those are just the most glaring examples. Ooh, I have lots more. Because trial and error with curriculum is all part of the homeschooling adventure, right? Keep in mind, every child learns in his or her own way. Each one's got a unique twist. What works best for your visual learner may be absolute death for your hands-on child. In fact, the only resources that work for a wide variety of kids would be those few that hit all the learning styles. So you can pretty much expect you have to switch gears from one child to another. The point is that you do your research, you make your best choice, and then you're prepared to tweak or even abandon a resource. The trick is to stay in touch with your kids' progress on a daily basis, even in the high school years when the work is a lot more independent. You can save yourself a boatload of time and money by simply staying engaged in your homeschool and being willing to admit when something does not work. So as always, thank you so much for watching this video. Please check back here every other Wednesday when I post a new video. Better still, you can hit the old like button. The like button's down there, and subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to share it with your friends. Remember, here at Homeschool University, we have 3 key values. Be practical, be purposeful, be positive. With love and prayer and a little help from old Homeschool you can do this because you, homeschool mom, you are amazing.
Hey now, take a step outside and seize the day.